Welcome to Small Business, Big Network, the podcast for small business owners who want big results from their networking. I'm Liz Drury, a freelance voiceover artist who knows that if you're not working, then networking could help. Sarah Luong is a performance anxiety coach and founder of Think Positive English. She has some great tips to help people overcome anxiety around networking. Thank you very much for being my guest on the podcast today, Sarah.
That's a pleasure, Liz. It's really nice to be here.
Now, you're a performance anxiety coach, and we'll hear how that relates to networking shortly. But first of all, tell me something about your background. I believe you started off in music, is that right?
That's right. So I was fortunate enough to be given a place at one of the Royal Music Colleges, the one in Scotland, and I did a 4-year degree there in piano performance. What I learnt or realised afterwards was that although they did spend a lot of time teaching piano, they spent no time teaching performance. So effectively, 50% of the title of the course was not actually in the course, and we were expected to either perform and basically sink or swim.
So you weren't given any tips on how to do that successfully then?
Absolutely nothing.
So what happened after that then? You wanted to perform but didn't, presumably.
I basically, when I was at music college, did the necessary performing and did none of the optional extras. So I never did a masterclass. I never did any external performances. I never did any chamber or music. And I basically, because of my fear of performing, did not make the most of the time I was given at music college.
Yeah. And did anyone know that you were, that you had anxiety around performing? Was there any kind of help with that sort of thing at that time?
The only help that was offered was a little bit of Alexander technique. I think my teacher knew that I was struggling and knew that I was, really feeling the pressure. But back then, we're talking late 90s, there was nothing else around.
Mm. I mean, presumably things have changed a bit now, have they? Do you know what happens in music colleges these days?
I don't know what happens in the colleges now. I don't know how much help they give to young musicians who have the same problem that I do. I would like to think that because there is more awareness within society about nervousness and anxiety, that's had a knock-on effect, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah. And so what did you do instead?
I gave up playing the piano because it had too many bad associations. I just stopped and I went traveling. I spent 10 years living in Asia, traveling in Asia, particularly in China,
And how did you earn money while you were doing that?
teaching English as a foreign language.
How did you get into that to start with?
Um, well, basically, my partner of the time and I went to Bangkok and we liked Thailand and we decided to stay. And effectively, any foreigner could just get a job. You needed no qualifications, no degree, nothing. And so we both got jobs working as teachers, and I use that word loosely, in a school in the outskirts of Bangkok.
And what was that experience like?
It was good. We then went on to do a TEFL in Bangkok and stayed for another year in a different school. And my partner and I then separated, and I went off to Korea and taught there for a bit and traveled more and wound up in rural China.
Yeah. And what was that easy to just move about and teach wherever you happen to end up?
It's certainly back then, it was very, very easy. If you had a degree and any kind of teaching qualification, you could more or less find a job like that. It's really, really straightforward.
Yeah. And tell me about some of your memories from that time. Was there any place that you particularly enjoyed being and teaching?
China was definitely my favorite place. I love, all the places I went to were interesting, but because I went to China to study Tai Chi and because I had a very good relationship with the Tai Chi master that I studied with, that's definitely the one place that I look back and think I'm really, really proud that I did that.
Yeah. And you must have enjoyed what you were doing if you continued to do that for 10 years, I think you said.
Yeah, altogether, I was away for a decade. Yeah, I
Yeah.
loved it.
Yeah. And you must have met all sorts of people during that time.
Yep, all sorts of really interesting people, local people, traveling people, expats, the lot. Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah. And so what brought that time of traveling to an end then? What made you decide to come back?
Well, aging parents, were a big factor. I had a father who was quite unwell, and I wanted to come back and spend some time here. Originally, I only intended to be back for 18 months, but I met my partner, and then the lockdowns happened, and everything
Mm.
kind of changed, and I just ended up staying here.
And do you think you'll stay here for the long term now?
My partner and I are talking about taking a year off to go traveling. He's never been actual traveling, and I think he'd like to do that sooner rather than later. So that's definitely on the table.
Yeah. And so do you still teach English as a foreign language now that you're back here?
I've been teaching English as a foreign language in the UK. I taught in some of the language schools here, and I've also done a lot of work one-to-one online. But most of that is, although I do teach the language, a lot of that is also dealing with mindset and anxiety and kind of nerves around using the language.
Yeah, because that's really interesting. We had a quick chat about this before we started recording the podcast, and you were telling me that performance anxiety when speaking a second language is quite a big thing. So tell me some more about that.
Um, Performance anxiety when speaking a second language is a particular form of anxiety. Um, Most beginners, interestingly, don't really struggle with anxiety because if you're, and I remember this from learning Mandarin, you have so many little wins, as in, oh, I can say apple, I can go to the shop and buy something, that person understood me, that you tend to feel, if a little bit scared, you also get all this positive feedback. By the time people reach a language level where they would be able to, for example, work in a multinational corporation or come to the UK to do a master's degree in English, the expectations that are placed on them are obviously much higher.
Mm,
And if that person has been through an education system or has had teachers who have made them feel inadequate or fearful or shameful, they will be carrying, or they could be carrying, a lot of anxiety around needing to use that language.
mm. So when did you start helping people with performance anxiety, and what made you want to do that?
I didn't realize it at the time. When I first started teaching English online, I worked a lot with women who were kind of in their 40s, very successful in their careers, and they needed English for work. And they would always come to me saying, I need more grammar, I need more vocabulary. But when we dug a little bit deeper, actually, all of that was fine. What they needed was more confidence
Mm,
in their abilities to use the language. And I didn't make the connection between them and the work I was doing to help them and my own experiences with performance anxiety until much later. And when I kind of connected those, it made sense to me that I had been so drawn to that problem because it was essentially the same problem I had
mm.
faced at music college.
Yeah. And so how do you help them? What form does the help take?
So at the moment, I use three different strategies to help people with performing anxiety. So strategy number one is practicing, um, and practicing effectively and with purpose. So a lot of people, for example, they might know that they need to chair a meeting in English on Friday, but they may not get around to kind of even just making a list of phrases that would be useful so they can have that right by them, or perhaps doing a role play with a colleague or a friend. So preparing for a performance goes a really long way in helping manage anxiety. We also do work around visualizing the outcome that people want. So instead of going with the stories that our brain will be feeding us, which tend to be negative, we need to counteract that with a positive outcome and focusing on what the individual wants. And finally, we work on breath work because when we learn how to breathe healthily, we can regulate that body's fight or flight response to stress. And we can start to get a grip on how our body is responding to speaking a foreign language or going to a networking event or doing a musical performance.
Yeah. So who are your clients then? What kind of people are you helping?
At the moment, I'm working with three different client groups. So I still work with non-native English speakers. So it tends to be people who live in the UK as overseas professionals and who just find using English in the workplace a bit overwhelming. I also work with musicians, and I also work with small business owners who need to get out there and do some networking and some pitching, but who find that quite scary and quite overwhelming.
Yeah, let's talk about the networking a bit more then, because a lot of people do find it really daunting, don't they?
Yeah.
What do they say to you, your clients, when you talk about networking, if they're not keen to go? What kind of excuses do they come up with?
I think the best excuse I ever had was someone who told me that when they had driven to a networking event and they said, I actually really hoped that the car park was full so I could just go home.
And how do you help them overcome it?
So I think again the breathing is important, and one thing that I would always say to someone who is going to an event, perhaps it's a new event or a big event or they're going to give a pitch, is if you can arrive a few minutes early, give yourself 5 minutes to do some breathing. And in particular, when we feel anxious, if we extend our exhalation and make it longer than the inhalation, we're activating the parasympathetic nervous system. And that means that all of those feelings that we get, like a pounding heart and shaking hands and a dry mouth, will be mitigated by the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system. So, arriving a little bit early, giving yourself that time to center yourself and ground yourself and calm yourself is a really good way to at least be able to walk in with some confidence and calmness.
Yeah. And you mentioned pitching there, which is often a part of networking meetings, which is very much akin to public speaking, isn't it? Is that something else that people come to you with anxiety about?
Definitely. I think a lot of people get very, very anxious about giving a pitch, even if it's, a comparatively informal one and everybody in the room is giving a little pitch. People can still get very, very tied up about that. And again, a lot of that is about the practice and really practicing what you want to say. Maybe finding a framework. There's a lot of frameworks for 1 minute pitches out there. All of them are good. I don't have a preference for which one, but having a framework, deciding what to say, making sure it speaks to your target client, and practicing and practicing and practicing until you know what you want to say. It's so important. And people do not always do that.
Mm, yeah. So how do you work with your clients? Do you work with them in person? Do you work with them online? And is it always one to one that you're doing?
The moment I'm focusing on one to one and predominantly on Zoom, because even if it's someone who's local to me, obviously, in terms of time, no one has to travel anywhere. I'm based in Sussex, so I could work face to face with people who are in my area, kind of thing. But I think most of us these days we're so used to Zoom, and it works so well for coaching that generally I'm meeting people on Zoom.
Yeah. And how do your clients find you, or how do you find them?
A lot of it is through networking. So I like networking. I go to as many face-to-face events and online events as I can, but also increasingly through social media, particularly LinkedIn. And I have a new website coming online hopefully soon.
Yeah. And so do you have any sort of preference for the kinds of meetings that you go to?
Um, no, not really. I go to quite a wide range of networking events, from kind of more formal ones to ones which are free on a Friday afternoon. You can just turn up and have a nice glass of wine and go home. I think what matters to me more is the kind of atmosphere there. So I like
Mm,
for it to be quite lively. I like for it to be friendly, and I like it when there's a real mix, a diverse mix of businesses from big ones to small ones. I think that makes for a really interesting event.
yeah. And let's come full circle now, back to the music. Do you play the piano again now?
I do. I started playing the piano again about 18 months ago when I applied for a job with West Sussex Music. And since then, I have done two performances and I am playing in two competitions at the start of this year. So for me, that's a complete transformation.
Yeah. You've obviously managed to overcome your anxiety. Do you still get nervous though, Sarah?
We are all always going to feel those physiological symptoms because our brains know that we're about to go on stage. Our brains know that this is something, important to us. So I do still feel a pounding heart. But because I know why my heart is pounding, and it's pounding because my body has just released a flood of adrenaline as part of the fight or flight response, and because I know that I can control that pounding heart through my breathing, it doesn't scare me. anymore. I think what often happens is people feel something like a pounding heart and start to panic about it, which makes it worse. So having an understanding of what the body is doing and why the body is doing it and knowing how to mitigate against that, it's really empowering.
Mm. What kind of feedback have you had from your clients that you've helped?
Um, a lot of it is around clarity and confidence. So I helped someone basically develop a pitch and practice a pitch and get that pitch to the point where they felt that they could go to networking events and give it. This was someone who had struggled a lot with networking, knew that they needed to go, but were very scared to be there. And certainly when it came to doing that 60-second pitch, that was completely terrifying for them.
Mm.
So we spent a long time working on it, making sure it actually was 60 seconds and not 120 seconds, which is easily done. We worked on the breath work and we did a lot of things around visualization. And for that client to come out of a little package of coaching with a workable pitch that she knew and which connected with her and which was directed at her ideal clients, that was transformational. She'd never had that before.
Yeah. So are there any sort of quick tips that you can give us for people who are feeling anxious about going networking?
I would say a good thing to do if the organisers release a list of attendees is to have a look at that, and maybe just choose one or two people that you might like to have a talk with. You can go and have a look at their LinkedIn profiles and come up with a question or two, an open-ended question, such as how long have you been doing this? Because it gives you like a footing when you walk in the door. You know what that person looks like, you know what you want to talk to them about, and that can be really, really helpful. And I think another tip would be to understand a little bit about the body language cues that people are giving off. So if a group of three is having a chat, it's quite possible that one of that group of three is feeling a little bit out of place, because groups of three are often a bit like that. So that's quite a good group to go and join. If you have a pair who are facing each other and who are clearly engaged in a deep conversation, it's best not to go and join them, because they obviously have something they're trying to say to each other. So having an understanding of basic body language and how to interpret that, I think, is also really, really helpful.
Yeah, great tips. Thank you very much, Sarah. So my final question, if people would like to connect with you, what is the best place for them to find you?
At the moment, LinkedIn is definitely the best place to find me. As I said, I'm working on a new website, but it won't be ready probably till March or April time this year. So my LinkedIn profile is definitely best.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for my guest.
Thanks so much for your time, Liz. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Small Business, Big Network. If you found this podcast useful, please do rate, review and subscribe. And don't forget to share it with the rest of your network too.